I can't believe this is free, honestly. It's really good, man. So we all know it's easy to get a great guitar sound with an expensive guitar, an expensive amp, and some expensive pedals. But what about the other end of the spectrum? Can you get a great sound with a relatively cheap guitar and using free plugins? We're gonna try that out in today's video. We're gonna take a look at 3 different guitar rigs at 3 very different price points and see what the pros and cons are for each level. We'll dial in each setup to get the best sound possible and then play over the same backing track to hear how they compare in the context of an actual mix. But before we jump in, I should point out this video is not sponsored by anyone. None of these companies know that I'm making this video and nobody's paying me for this video. But there will be some affiliate links in the description. Those will take you to Sweetwater. Great way to support the channel if you like what I'm doing here. And also some of the concepts that we're gonna talk about here, I actually have video courses dedicated to, like the tone course and the amp course. You can check those out for a special discount in the description box. So with all that out of the way, let's take a look at our budget tier. Okay, so representing the budget setup today, we're gonna be using the Squier Classic Vibe Stratocaster. This is going right now on Sweetwater for like $419.99. Now there are definitely cheaper Stratocasters or other guitars than this at the $400 level, but I think the Classic Vibe series is really good. You get a lot for your money, and this guitar plays and sounds great. It's totally stock, no mods, hasn't even had a setup. So for the guitar amp setup, we're gonna go with a free option, which is a free amp plugin. But because we're using a plugin, not actual amp, we need a way to get our guitar signal into our computer, which means we need an interface. And for that, I have the Focusrite Scarlett 2i2 4th generation. This is a budget-friendly 2-channel interface, really bare bones, but it's doing what we needed to do here, which is basically take a direct instrument signal and get us into our amp sim. Now, because I'm running a Mac, we're gonna be using the stock GarageBand guitar amp sim today. This comes free with basically any Mac computer. Full disclosure, I've never actually tried the Logic or GarageBand amp sim, so we're gonna check it out today. But for those of you that don't have GarageBand or you don't want to use GarageBand, we're gonna be using the Neural Amp Sim. This is an open source software that lets you profile your amplifiers, it lets you make IRs, and it lets you upload and share profiles and IRs completely for free. Now, I'm just checking this out for the first time today. I know there's probably more experienced users out there, but for now we're gonna start with GarageBand. We've got an instance of the stock plugin pulled up here. Obviously this is supposed to be a Vox AC30, but for just a jumping off point, this does not suck at all. Actually, this is pretty impressive because you've got a lot of control over the sound of this thing. Like, for example, we can change the mic placement with the proximity and the location on the speaker. So if we take this ribbon mic, this 121, I can even change microphones. Let's put a 57 on it. Okay, so let's switch the cabinet. Let's try like a black panel 110. So this would be like a Fender Princeton, for example. A little harsh, but not bad. Let's try a vintage British 412, like a Marshall 412. I mean, that's not bad at all, honestly. Then we got some amp controls here, so push a little treble, bring some bass out, and maybe add some presence too to get a little more top end. I don't hate that at all. Okay, so I've got this loop here, just a drum loop, and I put down some bass on top of it. And we're gonna use this as a way to kind of like test these different setups in a somewhat musical context. It's just a simple 1-4-5 blues in A, but I'm gonna take this sound that I've got pulled up here, add a little distortion to it. And I'm just gonna take a swing at recording on this and see how it sounds. I can't believe this is free, honestly. I mean, it's been well over a decade since I opened GarageBand for the last time, and it's really good, man. Like, this is a fully fledged DAW. When I first had GarageBand in like 2012, it was not this. This is basically like Logic. For the bass guitar, I'm even using the GarageBand amps, which this is like a B15, like a flip top. I think the real takeaway from this video for me is don't sleep on the stock Apple amp sims. But let's say you're not a Mac user, there is a free option that I just found out about today actually called Neural Amp Modeler. Now, Neural Amp Modeler has a bit of a cult following online, apparently. It's a free open source plugin that anyone can download, and it gives you access to a whole host of features, like being able to capture and profile your own amps, make your own impulse responses, or like what I did today, which is go online to Tone Hunt and download a whole host of rigs that people have made themselves, as well as IRs and all kinds of stuff. So I've got it pulled up in GarageBand as a plugin. So you can use it standalone just on your laptop, or you can use it in your DAW. And I'm still new to this platform. So there's some issues that I'm having, which is that like different captures or different profiles are wildly different gain levels or volume levels. But they don't sound bad. I think this is a Fender profile that I downloaded, and then I've got all these different impulse responses here. In fact, there's some really cool Vox stuff in here too. Okay, so the takeaway for me with the budget rig is I'm $600 in here between the guitar and the interface, and I'm using free software that either came with my computer or I downloaded for free, and I'm able to get some really, really good tones, especially with that GarageBand plugin. That thing sounds incredible. And conversely, on the other side, the Neural Amp Modeler, I think, gives you access to a really cool thing, which is being able to capture and profile amps or download other people's captures. Now, the downside with that, in my experience, is many of them are just not very good sounding. Most of the stuff that I downloaded is pretty terrible, actually, but there's some gems in there. There's some cool impulse responses and there's some cool sounds. And so, you know, if you're willing to sift through and spend the time to find a couple of sounds that you really like, dude, for $600, the budget tier, it's pretty killing. Okay, so for the mid-tier setup, we're going with an American Strat. This is the American Vintage 2 series. My production assistant, Chris, behind the camera, this is his guitar. He kindly brought in for the video today. But it's completely stock pickups, stock everything, and it's gonna be our representation for the mid-tier, sort of middle-of-the-road, American, off-the-shelf Fender guitar. And for the rig, we are going with the Quad Cortex from Neural DSP. Now, and to keep on with the Strat and AC30 theme, I actually downloaded a capture from the Quad Cortex app. This is one of the Tone Junkie captures, 66 AC30 JMP OD. And it sounds pretty good. I mean, it's a really good jumping off point, I think, for what we're going for. Now that sounds really good to start, but I think there's a few EQ things that I want to change before we start to record. So I put together this little preset here, and I've started with adding a parametric EQ at the end of the chain. And essentially what I'm doing is cutting a little low mid, something right around 340 Hertz, because if you listen, I'll bypass it here. You can hear this sort of like low mid rumble happening. And that's just not gonna sit well in the context of a mix. It's gonna kind of take the same frequency space as the bass drum and the bass guitar. So I just dipped that out a little bit. And then conversely, I wanted a little bit more upper mid-range bite. So right here, I've added a little 4K. So here's what it sounds like without the EQ. And with the EQ. So it's really subtle, but it kind of just cleans up the whole profile overall. So I'm happy with that. Then I've added some other things in here. I've got a little overdrive in front. Now, one other note about the EQ is you can see I've got it at the very end of the signal chain here. So it's going to be processing everything going into the front of it, including this overdrive. Let's try just the exotic Z boost. I'm gonna bring the gain down and the volume up a little bit. Okay, so how does this rig compare to the budget rig? I mean, the difference is primarily how it feels to the player. This guitar is a pretty solid step up from the Squier. It's more comfortable to play. Now, the interesting thing though, comparing the actual sound of the rig to the budget tier, they're relatively indistinguishable in the context of that jam track. In fact, if I put this up for a blind test, I doubt most people would be able to tell the difference between the $600 stock GarageBand setup and the multi-$1,000 Quad Cortex. But the Quad Cortex allows you to do a lot more than that basic setup. For example, I can take this to a gig, I can take this to a jam, I can use it as its own audio interface. The basic setup just isn't that practical. If I was gonna try and gig with that, I'd have to bring that interface and my laptop, and I'd have to have all that stuff set up on stage and then have to figure out some kind of monitoring solution, whereas this is the guitar and the Quad Cortex, and you're basically done. This is a really great all-around rig. In fact, that's what a lot of people do with the Quad Cortex. It is their sort of main thing that they build their entire rig around. It's pretty great for that. I want to do a ribbon and a 57.
How unexpected.
Yeah, shocking. Use the 57, and my favorite ribbon for guitars is this. I talk about this in videos all the time, but it's my AEA R92. I bought this a few years ago and have been using it on basically everything I've recorded ever since. So. The first day I ever worked in a recording studio, I got, maybe not yelled at, but I got corrected on trying to put a mic on a mic stand. What I was trying to do was basically spin the mic, which is not what you want to do, especially when at the time I was holding a very expensive Neumann condenser. Basically, loosen the arm of the stand and spin the stand into the mic, rather than the other way around. Seems common sense, but you know. If you own an old AC30, you always want to run a fan behind it, because these early 60s models have these narrow vent panels on top here, and they get incredibly hot inside the chassis, like hot enough to do damage to some of the components, because the chassis is facing this way, so the tubes are like right here, and it's just baking inside. So shout out to Dan from that pedal show. When I bought this amp a few years ago, that was the first thing he told me. It's like, before you do anything else, if the amp is on, run a little fan in the back to just keep air flowing, and you know, keep your amp from blowing up. for the top tier, we're gonna start with the guitar. This is my Shabbat Lynx. I bought this a few years ago from Avi Shabbat off of the NAMM floor. This is the Strat that made me love Strats. It's a Mary Kay with a swamp ash body, maple neck, Lawler pickups. It's super lightweight, beautifully made guitar. It resonates. This really is one of the best Strats I've ever played. Then from the guitar, we're gonna be running into my pedal board. This is the studio board that Mason from Vertex built for me a few years ago, and it's a great board. It's designed to have effects swapped in and out for different applications, and this is how we have it set up today. Then from that board, I'm running through the TX RX system, so I can send the signal downstairs to my 1964 Vox AC30. This is a real vintage one I bought a few years ago from Lindsay down at Maple Street Guitars here in Atlanta. This is a pre-top boost model, so I'm plugged into the Brilliant channel, and I've got it pushed pretty hard, and this rig sounds good. Okay, so I got the amp set up downstairs, and we're gonna get the mics pulled up. I've got the mics going through this preamp. This is the Warm Audio WA-2 MPX, super catchy name, but that's a tube mic pre. R92 is on this left channel, the 57 is on the right channel, so I'm just gonna get the gain dialed in here, and we'll start by just listening to the R92. That sounds really good already. All right, here's the 57, and I've got the 57 off axis. So it's at the very edge of the speaker cone, but it's pointing towards the dust cap, towards the center of the speaker cones. So you can hear that's where we're getting that like bite from. And then when I combine the two, this is what I've got. So, okay, immediately this feels the best to me of all three rigs. There's something to be said for actually taking the time to stick some good microphones in front of a good amplifier, put it through some good mic preamps, and actually play it. This is how I want a rig like this to sound. This Strat with that amplifier, with those mics, this is doing exactly what I want it to do. It's breaking up in a really nice organic way. The amp is compressing naturally how I expect it to feel under my hands, which is something that some of the modelers and some of the plugins struggle to mimic, is the actual feeling of the amp. And that's two different things. There's the sound of the rig coming through the speakers, and then there's the way the rig feels. And of all three rigs, this feels the best. That video we did a couple years ago, Mateus was able to pick out the difference between the Dream pedal and the actual amp, not because of the sound, but because the way it felt under his hands. And this is what kind of gets lost in the whole modeling versus tube amp debate is, yes, the way modelers sound now, or plugins sound now, on a recording are basically indistinguishable from real tube amps. But where they still struggle, in my experience, is the feeling. How does it compress? How does it respond under your hands? So to wrap up, I think the thing to focus on here is the fact that you can literally get a great guitar sound at just about any budget. Honestly, for me, the most impressive part of this video was playing that free GarageBand plugin. I genuinely am shocked at how good that thing sounds. And if you have a Mac computer, it's free. You already have access to it, which is amazing. So with a basic audio interface, which you can even go more budget than what we had with the Focusrite, you can have a whole host of great sounds. And I think it's actually a pretty user-friendly platform when it comes to learning a lot of these things like mic placement and EQ and gain staging of your amplifier and what types of effects do what. All of that stuff is available in the GarageBand plugin. But for the style of music that I play and the sounds that I go for, there's something to be said about a great guitar plugged into a great amplifier. It may just be a placebo. It totally could just be in my head, but I don't really care. That's what matters. If I like the way that I sound and I feel good when I'm playing, I'm going to sound better. The point is, there is no right or wrong way to do this. There is no right or wrong budget or amount of money to spend on this stuff. It all comes down to you. Do you like the way you sound? Are you inspired when you pick up your guitar and plug it in to play? If you are, then it does not matter what you're playing or how much money you spent on it. If you are happy with the way that you sound and you like the way that you sound, then you're doing it right as far as I'm concerned. So that's gonna do it for today's video. Let me know what you thought. Which rig were you most surprised by or did you enjoy the most? Let me know in the comments section down below. I'll have some affiliate links in the description to some of these pieces of gear. Not all of them are affiliate links. And once again, this video is not sponsored by any of these companies at all. But if you want to learn more about some of this stuff, I'll have some Sweetwater affiliate links, which is a great way to support this channel if you enjoy what I'm doing. And also, if you want to go deeper on some of these concepts that I talked about, like EQ and compression and gain staging, I actually have 2 video courses dedicated to this, the tone course and the amp course. Both of those courses kind of dive deep into all of these topics. So if you're a relatively new player or if you've been playing for years and you want to get a better understanding of how all this stuff works, you can get a special discount on both of those courses by checking out the link in the description box down below. And I greatly appreciate the support. My name is Rhett Shull. Thank you so much for watching, and I will catch you on the next one.